We start with news from Australia, where Erin Patterson, who came to be known as the mushroom killer, has been sentenced to life in prison.
Your total effective sentence will be life imprisonment, and the period during which you will be ineligible for parole will be a very substantial one.
Erin Patterson stood up and effectively just took it, copped it on the chin, didn't really show a great deal of emotion, and within a minute or two she was escorted out of the room.
The notorious mushroom murders have captivated the world in a story that's compelling as any Agatha Christie mystery novel. Why can't we look away? And who's cashing in on our obsession? Hello, this is the Bloomberg Australia Podcast, and I'm Chris Bourke. Today, we're talking about the so-called mushroom murders, which this week saw Erin Patterson jailed for life after serving that now infamous beef Wellington lunch. Joining me is Ainsley Thomson from our Wellington Bureau, pure coincidence, I can assure you, who, like much of the world beyond Australia, has been following the case very closely. Today we're going to discuss what this case reveals about the booming and sometimes troubling business of true crime. Ainsley, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chris. It's good to be here.
Second week in a row for you. I think last week you were talking about everyone's favourite obsession, Labubu's. This week, something altogether far more darker, a much more darker obsession anyway. So on Monday, we learnt that Erin Patterson was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 33 years. For the handful of people out there who haven't been following this case, or every twist and turn of this case, can you briefly set the scene of the Patterson case, which has become known around the world simply as the mushroom murders?
Absolutely. And I will be brief because most people do know what happened.
I think so.
So it was back in July 2023, the end of July 2023, and Erin Patterson invited her estranged husband, Simon, and his parents, and her mother-in-law's sister and her husband over for lunch. And the reason was she was going to talk to them about her health problem and discuss the best way to break it to her children that she had cancer, or apparently had cancer. Her husband didn't attend, but the other four did. And at the meal, she served them beef Wellington, that fillet of beef wrapped in pastry with mushroom in between. And she served it in five individual servings. 4 of them were served on grey plates, and her one was served on an orange plate. And by that evening, the 4 guests were extremely ill. By the morning, they were in hospital. 3 of them went on to die. Only Ian Wilkinson survived.
You know, one thing that I constantly wondered throughout this whole case was how could she actually believe that she would get away with such an obvious crime? I mean, is that uncertainty part of what drew so many people in, do you think? Absolutely.
I think that is really part of what caused this huge interest in this case. The fact that someone could, there was no one else who could have done it except her. She cooked the meal. So, it was her who put mushrooms of some description in there. So, the fact that she maintained her innocence the whole way through, including 8 days on the stand, that just, sowed the seed of doubt in people's mind that, what was her motive? That was always the big question. What was her motive? Why did she do this?
I love how you've described this as Agatha Christie meets Australian suburbia. Why do you think this case did strike such a chord globally? I mean, media all over the world has been covering this.
Absolutely. I mean, it really did draw attention from the world over. And I think the setting was a big part of it. I talked to Xanthi Mallet, who's a associate professor and criminologist at Central Queensland University. And she was saying it's that jarring position of this lovely, rural setting, this little town, and this very unexpected and violent deaths, in fact, happen there. And that really drew people in. It is unexpected. And I think there is that slight Agatha Christie element to it, that setup of the dining room, the limited scene, the 4 victims, they were all closely connected, and then this exotic murder weapon of death cap mushrooms, which was just, bizarre. No one had, heard of them being used in this way before. And that really drew people in. And I think to my mind, also, the big thing is Erin Patterson herself. Yeah. A lot of people point to, and in fact, Gil Marsden I spoke to, who is making a documentary about these murders. He was saying that moment where Erin gave that interview to the media, everyone knows what I'm talking about probably, who's seen any part of this case. They always show this coverage of her standing next to her car and kind of crying. And her emotional reaction was unusual.
Yeah.
And I think that immediately people were kind of like, what's going on here? It was jarring. It wasn't what we expected. As Xanthi Mallet said to me, that doesn't make someone guilty, but it does kind of, create this interest in the case, and people are kind of, looking at it more closely, wondering what's going on here.
Yeah, and you're in New Zealand, obviously. What's the coverage been like there? Is everyone pretty much obsessed there as well? I
think so, yes. I mean, as I said, people just haven't seen a case like this before. And the fact that it's family, it's, her parents-in-law were involved. It's absolutely, it's been fascinating to people to hear the sentencing and all the comments made by the judge there was quite chilling hearing a lot of those details, I think.
And you have a very insightful essay that's come out this week, which looks very closely at how this case has become such a global spectacle, if you like. An entire, as you say in this essay, an entire media ecosystem has sprung up around the case. What's in the works?
There's a lot coming out. As I said, Gil Marsden has got a documentary coming out on the 14th of September. That's a 3-part documentary. There's already been quite a few current affair style programs come out, the 1 hour specials, etc. There are books coming out. Helen Garner is co-authoring one of those books. There's been obviously countless articles, podcasts. It's just, there's so much appetite to find out more about this, to try and discover what her motive was, and to hear from the people who were involved in the case.
And this kind of coverage was even referenced in the sentencing on Monday. If you remember, Justice Christopher Beale actually he referred to this kind of flurry of attention. Quote, he said, "Given the unprecedented media coverage of your case and the books, documentaries and TV series, which are all in the pipeline, you are likely to remain a notorious prisoner for many years to come, and as such, remain at significant risk from other prisoners." So that implies that this unprecedented coverage weighed on part of his decision to allow that parole after 33 years.
I think so. I mean, because she is at danger from these other prisoners, because she is so notorious, she has to essentially be in solitary confinement. And she's been in there and by herself for 15 months. And it sounds like awful conditions. I mean, she's hardly allowed outside. She can't have access to the library, etc., or, very limited access to the library. So yes, that did weigh. He was clearly heavily weighed on him, and his decision to grant the 33 years, the non-parole period of 33 years.
Yeah, he went into some quite a lot of detail about the small courtyard, for example, that she had access to, and the limited amount of time she was able to leave the cell. And it became apparent, I think, as you were watching the justice deliver those comments, that there was almost a bit of sympathy kind of coming out from him, and it became apparent as he proceeded that she was going to probably get a non-parole period.
Yes, I think so. I think from memory, he said something like, there's some convention, human rights convention, where you can only spend 15 days in solitary confinement, and she spent 15 months. So, what that does to a person is, it's hard to comprehend.
But it's extraordinary that this media coverage weighed on that decision. And I guess that's, something for all of us to think about there, I guess. But is there anyone who's actually going to be making money from this in terms of this? We've got this whole secondary economy as well, merchandise, even TikTok sleuths building followings off this case.
Absolutely. I mean, one person who definitely won't be making money obviously as Erin Patterson herself, the Process of Crime Act prevent that happening. But yes, I mean, there will be people who, make reasonable money out of what is going on, out of these documentaries, podcasts, books, etc.
And when we come back, what does all this attention on the Erin Patterson case say about us? Welcome back to the Bloomberg Australia Podcast. You're here with me, Chris Bourke, and I'm talking to Wellington-based wealth editor Ainsley Thomson about the mushroom murders case that's gripped the world and what it says about our appetite for the grisliest of news. Okay, Ainsley, time for an awkward question. 3 people are dead, including a couple that had been together for about half a century. And many lives have been ruined because of that. And it's not just Patterson. If you look at the press, it seems that Australians are frothing over the coverage of Desi Freeman, a man still on the run after killing 2 policemen. Even in your neck of the woods, we learned Monday that the notorious fugitive father Tom Phillips was shot dead. Should people feel guilty for lapping all this up?
That's a really interesting question. And it was the central question behind the essay I wrote, because I wanted to find out, I'm interested in these things, and I wanted to know if I should feel guilty about it.
And do you?
So I'm conflicted, definitely. I mean, certainly my husband always points out my grisly interest in these things, that it's not a particularly attractive quality. But one thing I did learn after talking to Xanthi Mallet and, just reading about the true crime genre is that there are sort of sound reasons that we are drawn to it as humans. It's about this kind of wanting to restore, I guess, a sense of order where there's chaos, of trying to find out what people's motives are, about, looking at the worst part of society in a I guess, a safe way. Almost a form of protection. If we can understand what happened and why it happened, maybe we can prevent something like that happening to us. So I think that's part of the sort of psychology of looking at it. Another thing that is really interesting is that women are far more drawn to this genre than men. And Xanthi Mallet said she thinks it's because women in general are very interested in relationships and what makes people tick, etc. And that is why they are drawn to it. So, I did find that interesting to kind of, I guess, rationalize I wouldn't say it's an obsession, Chris, but my interest in some of these subjects.
That's really interesting, especially about women being the biggest consumers. But is true crime, is the true crime industry, is it on the rise, this following, this popularity? Is it something that is like a growth industry, if you like?
It definitely is on the rise. I think our modern media environment really feeds it. Podcasts, the fact that we've got citizen journalists even, things like Reddit and chat rooms, which are really promoting this kind of amateur sleuth type activity, that is all definitely on the rise. And there's, as we were saying before, there's a huge market here. In America, there was one study which said 84% of people over the age of 13 consume true crime in some form, be it podcast or TV or
Wow.
in some way. But it is a genre that's been with us for an awfully long time. Daniel Defoe, back in I think it was the 1720s, he started writing accounts of true crime, and then we had obviously Jack the Ripper in the Victorian period, which people were absolutely obsessed with. In the 1960s, it really took off with Truman Capote and In Cold Blood. And he wrote that amazing book, which is, reporting but sort of done in the way of a thriller. So it's a really compelling read. And since then, there's been various documentaries and books, etc., that have really gained a lot of public attention. But I think the modern period where it really began was the Serial podcast in 2014.
Right. Yep.
And that was just a huge hit. I think it's been downloaded at least 300 million times. And that last count of 300 million was back in 2018. So it's probably far greater than that now. So that really took it to that next level. And podcasts exploring this whole area.
Incredible. Erin Patterson, this week learned that she would be in prison for a very long time, at least until she's in her 80s, I guess. Does this story end there?
Well, I mean, we know that she can appeal, and she may well do so. So we will have to wait and see if that happens. As far as all the media coverage, etc., which is still to come out, no, the story most certainly does not end there. And I'm sure it will be explored for an awfully long time. As we were discussing earlier, that lack of motive, of really clear motive, I think is what is going to keep it alive. People are going to keep trying to work out what happened there and why on earth she did this.
So I guess the real answer to that question is no. The coverage of this story seems like it's only just beginning. Ainsley Thomson, thank you for appearing on the Bloomberg Australia podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
This episode was recorded on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. It was produced by Paul Allen and edited by Ainsley Chandler and Rebecca Jones. I'm Chris Bourke. See you next week.